Hi everybody, I'm Michael. This is a review for One Morning They'll Hang Him. So it's a 1950 short story by Marjorie Allingham, starring Detective Albert Campion. So this is the last book in my collection of short stories starring famous detectives. And this was a good one. I like Campion. So he's kind of funny. I don't know. He's sort of like Sherlock Holmes too. So he's more like a humorous Sherlock Holmes. Kind of. Let me put it this way. Okay, so he's got his partner named Kenny, who's his detective partner, who basically explains the mystery to him. And he's like, hey, we've got this case which seems like an open and shut case, but we don't know where the murder weapon is. And Albert Campion's just sort of listens to the story, makes some jokes every now and then, but he's mostly serious. And the story is that we've got, this man, he wants to be married to this woman, and, he needs the blessing of his aunt for whatever reason, and his aunt lives alone in this house. Lives a house that's full of antiquities, so she's got like 3 stories full of antiques. And is she willing to clear out the 3rd floor so he and his bride can live there? No! And they had a big public fight about it. And at the big public fight, he says something along the lines of, "The sun has gone down," which is played up like it's a big clue. And he gets his army stuff, and then he leaves. And he comes back later that night around midnight and goes up to the front door. And this is all confirmed, and she's found dead the next day. She's been shot. It's confirmed because there were like people who saw him approach the door, and he left on the bus. We've got a chatty bus man. And so, Campion thinks it up, and then he gets really funny with his investigation. Well, I wouldn't say it's too humorous. It's no like the other detectives in this book were funnier. Father Brown and Peter Wimsey, those were funnier detectives. Even Hercule Poirot was a little bit more amusing. But Campion gets into somewhat silly, funny territory here on the trip up, because he wastes a bunch of time at a chemistry shop, and then he wastes a bunch of time harassing the maid, and he forces her to show him every single like antique. He just gets giddy because he really loves antiques. He's like, "Ooh, what's that one? Oh, I want to see that one," and he just wastes like hours checking this out. And it turns out the entire thing is a ruse. So spoiler territory here. I'm gonna explain the mystery solution. So the maid is the culprit. She shot the old woman, and we sort of, Campion sort of figured this out, because it's like, you know what, this elderly lady in a house with 3 stories and all the antiques are in pristine condition? No way. Somebody's got to be taking care of them. Somebody who actually cares about them. Because if this nurse, this maid person, didn't care about the antiques, she would let the antiques on like the 3rd floor go to rot, go to dust. Nobody goes up there. No one would know the difference, right? So he figures, hey, this nurse wanted to. She has a motive because she wants to keep all the antiques, and she has a motive for keeping the nephew out of the picture, because if he gets married, he's probably going to have kids, right? And those kids will inherit everything. But by framing the nephew for murder, he gets out of the way, and she gets the house with antiques. So that's sort of, she had a really good motive. That's what clued Campion on. And the sun goes down. So that's a reference to a Bible verse, "Never let the sun go down in your anger." And apparently that just is how they reacted. Growing up, they got really mad at each other, but they never let the sun go down on their anger. And they always wrote apologies to each other. So that's why he came back. He wanted to write an apology. And she also wanted to write an apology. She wrote an apology letter saying she forgave him and she's totally fine with them moving into the house and living there. That was sort of a detail I forgot to mention earlier, but that was brought up. It sort of made the story more tragic that, she was murdered right after she had forgiven him. And yeah. So as for the murder weapon and, the long time checking out the antiques, that was a ruse as well. He was waiting for the mail to show up because he correctly deduced that the maid simply, shot the old woman, put the gun in a package, and mailed it to herself. And so he's simply delaying until the mail showed up so he could open the mail and steal the gun and prove her guilty. Yeah. And there's a funny joke at the end where Kenny shows up, I think in the middle of the night, or maybe it's the next day. He's like, something's really been bothering me. How did you know when the mail would arrive? And he's like, I asked somebody at the store when the mail guy usually shows up. Elementary, my dear Kenny. So that was a funny joke. So it's a pretty good story. Mildly humorous. I think I'm giving the humor more credit than it deserves, but it was okay. And the series of events was thought out. It's sort of like a closed room murder mystery, although not really. But yeah, so I'd say all the pieces came together well. I could see why this would be considered a famous detective if the other stories starring Albert Campion are just as good. So I'd give this one a thumbs up.